In this video, that is the last one covering the Biden administration, I'm going to address an article appeared on January 3 in Foreign Affairs. The title is The Real Risk of Escalation in Ukraine. And the authors are Michael Posnansky and William C. Wolford. The article proposes the so-called SALAMI strategy and tries to justify Biden's what they call gradualism in Ukraine. I actually call it the BALONEY strategy. And you will soon realize why, because it reduces the goal of conflict, the goal of foreign policy in this situation of conflict to a matter of teasing and teasing your enemy until you find what his real red lines are, and it's just another word for appeasement. So I'm going to develop this take in 7 points. This is the first point. Then let's go to point number 2. Just in case, all the images you are going to see are extracts from the real article, so you can judge the authors in their own words. Number 2 would be what are the goals? What are the goals you expect to achieve? Is winning objectives so you can establish a reasonable peace, or no. According to these two enlightened people, the real goal is to divine, to guess, to find the actual red lines of your enemy. And why? Because the authors mentioned that, Putin has crossed many red lines and nothing has happened. And that proves that they were not the real red lines. So what about containing Putin? No. The real goals are to find out the actual red lines, and which are these the red lines that are going to make him actually mad. So the matter is not to make him mad because he's going to be very angry. That's read it by yourself and you will see if I am exaggerating. Look, I am not for provoking a big power, especially if they are armed with nuclear weapons. But examples of provoking unnecessarily a big power are the armed sales to Taiwan and Philippines. Why? Because they achieve no real goal. Taiwan and the Philippines cannot stand China by themselves. Ukraine has actually not could, but has stood to Ukraine for almost 3 years by itself. Taiwan and the Philippines could not stop China in a similar situation. Besides that, something that I addressed in a previous video is that you have to know who you are talking to. And in the case of Putin, you don't have a sociopath who would be willing to fall in flames like Hitler in 1945 and bring all Germany with him, resisting to the very end, instead of surrendering when all possibility of victory was gone. No, we're talking about a psychopath, somebody who thinks like a mob boss. So he is he has siphoned, he and his oligarchs has siphoned lots of wealth from Ukraine over decades. They have siphoned them to the West because that's where they felt more comfortable, more familiar. Now those riches are going to be siphoned to the East, to a yuan zone where they expect not to be touched by Western sanctions. So the idea that so if Putin uses nuclear weapons, even tactical weapons, defying Xi Jinping, and Xi Jinping closes his lifeline to Putin because the real reason the Russian economy is still running is because of that economic lifeline. Where is he going to go? He cannot return to the West. He would have to stay in the East, but if without China, what is he going to do? Even Kim Jong Un knows the limits of his temper tantrums because if something happens, he knows he can always go to China. But if Putin defies China in that end that is vital for China's long-term goals, where is he going to go? So he's not going to use nuclear weapons. And if at worst he could use a tactical nuclear weapon that would make no difference, and that could be used by the West to push Xi to decide whether he's going to keep Russia's economy alive, or he's going to drop somebody who has become a liability. Besides that, what is this nonsense about this tip for tat, until you find the not the false red line by the actual red lines. No, this I don't know how Foreign Affairs has published this article, but okay, that let us expose all the stupidity behind the Ukraine's policy sponsored by Jake Sullivan. Learn from John Kennedy in 1962, the Cuban Missiles Crisis. There was a moment for action. He was not trying to say, or these are actual red line or a false red line. No, he blockaded Cuba. Only then he engaged in negotiation. And yes, he made concessions. The missiles NATO had in Turkey were removed, but he make he didn't wait as these two guys propose I don't know if they are the father of the Baloney strategy, but these are the first one I have seen defending. Kennedy didn't wait for the Russians to make the next step, and they to tease them, and they to take a little step when they take another step to take another little step to balance the no, that's nonsense. And we have a historical precedent showing how stupid this Baloney strategy is. Number three, this is Baloney strategy, you can call it a strategy, implies a reactive position. A reactive position in the case of a country as small as Ukraine compared to Russia in terms of population, the size of the army, etc., is fatal because Ukraine cannot win uh, an attrition war against Russia. And the authors themselves seem to acknowledge the limits, even though they are, in their own words, defending the Biden's gradualism. The authors themselves seem to acknowledge the limits of their baloney when they say, yet there is little precedent from the Cold War of one superpower supplying a smaller state under attack with the physical means to strike the sovereign territory of a nuclear armed aggressor with which it shares a large continuous border. And then in another part it says it appears to consign Ukraine to an attrition war in which it faces unsurmountable odds. So if your Wallonia strategy doesn't lead to victory, because this cannot lead to victory, to what it leads? To some level of defeat. Defeat that supposedly is going to appease Russia from being the bad boy in the neighborhood. And that shows if how little you know of foreign policy, because if you see how Putin understands trade, and if you want an example of how Putin understands foreign policy and trade, go see Africa, go see Georgia, go see Moldova and other countries. Why do you think Poland is so afraid of what happens in Ukraine? So this is the baloney these two authors want to convince us about. Number four, and this is the best point because it exposes the stupidity of this strategy, is what is the solution when the enemy is a dictator? And the obvious solution in this case is surrender. Why wasting more lives and treasury? Just invite Zelensky to the White House, arrest him, and send him in a cage to Moscow. So let's read these two clowns in their own words. Surprising military setbacks, especially early in the war, had raised real questions about Putin's grip on power. Then, in another part, Washington received highly sensitive, credible intelligence based on conversations inside the Kremlin that Putin was seriously considering using a tactical nuclear weapon. And then, in another part, in October 2022, the retired general and former CIA director David Petraeus described Putin as desperate. So if he's desperate, the only way to prevent crossing the actual red lines is that is getting Ukraine to capitulate, to surrender, because if anything but victory is going to be seen by Putin as a red line, a real red line, an actual red line, then the only way you have to avoid that real red line, that according to these clowns are the real goals of war, is by capitulation. Otherwise, it's an existential threat. And the next time, because he's a dictator who is desperate, when he wants to do something similar in Moldova, in Georgia, in Africa, or wherever, or again in the Middle East, because if we let him win, Ukraine don't think that he's going to become a good boy. No, he's going to become a privateer in the yuan zone. He's going to his war is going to be his economy model. What are you going to do? According to these clowns, that he would be desperate if he falls. So you have to just let him win. There's no other way. Otherwise, you would be crossing an actual red line. So this is and then let me share with you this other extract. Fear, to be sure, fears of escalation related to regime survival have ebbed as Russia's position stabilized. So you see now how have we been able to cool down the fears of escalation by letting Russia win. So now that they have stabilized, now that they have crashed all the efforts Ukraine made to regain territory, now that we are getting a real goal, because the real goal is to cool down the fears of escalation, avoid an actual red line. You see, you were wrong. Getting Ukraine to win and to down South Putin was wrong. What we had to do is to achieve the balance. So Ukraine was winning, so cut him supplies, cut him all the supplies, so cut him all artillery, so they cannot even train their own people. Because you see, if you don't, as we saw in that good article written by Jack Watling, if you don't have the supplies, you have to put more people to defend those positions, and so you have those seasoned soldiers are stuck in those positions at the front, and we get what we have gotten with the 155 division that failed because they couldn't get seasoned soldiers. It was a brigade made of new people, green conscripts, and the result was that it disintegrated because it didn't have the more seasoned soldiers that could have given them cohesion, and we could not remove them from the front because otherwise we could have been crossing an actual red line. You see, helping Ukraine to achieve achieve real progress in the front was crossing a real red line. So this is what the Baloney strategy proposes. Number 5, if this is what the position of the United States should be, then who is dictating the terms of engagement? Of course, it has to be Putin, because if you try to dictate the terms of engagement and you make real progress, you are going to unbalance the situation. And then you are going to get closer to a real red line, because that means that Putin could be at risk of, who is going to be desperate, and he's a dictator. So because of that, you have to reward him. You have to listen to these two guys. You have to reward him with the right to dictate the terms of engagement. So only until he brought the North Korean troops, only until he crashed the beachhead at Dnipro, only after he had increased the number of casualties to alarm the Ukrainian casualties to alarming numbers, only then, yeah, okay, you can use that account. This is genius. Then number 6, and this is a good one. These two clowns disregard the effect of political changes. So what if it takes us too long to realize what the real red lines are, and there is a change in the administration, like for instance, here in the United States with Trump, who since 2022 has not this has not disguised his sympathy for Vladimir Putin, or in the case of France, imagine that Le Pen wins. So this baloney strategy implies that you have all the time, unlimited time to act, and somebody should tell them that this, if you are Putin or Xi Jinping, you have unlimited time to act. But if you are a Western government, you don't, because of something called elections. Just let me share with you the most recent article that is relevant for this discussion. It's from the Washington Post, and it says that Ukraine hawk removed from House intelligence role reportedly at Trump's request. The move by Speaker Mike Johnson provides the latest evidence of a change in posture more favorable to Russia under Donald Trump. So it's not just the White House, but it's also the in Congress, where people and who have were Republicans but had very reasonable position about Ukraine. Remember that in 2022, after Biden gave great speeches to convoke all the world to support Ukraine, when it came the moment to action to send the actual weapons, he hesitated. He was resistant. It was Republicans, not the representative of the whole party, but enough Republicans who said, "Do you want to win or not? If you don't want to win, why are you getting involved?" That was stupid, because were forgetting that Putin's victory would elevate him to senior partner in the UN zone. But they were correct in that, well, if you are promising Ukraine help, why are you hesitating at the moment when you had to send the actual help? But they don't, in their little world, the world of the salami strategy, the baloney strategy, those considerations are not relevant. And finally, number 7, they not content enough with having said all these nonsense that supposedly were successful during the Cold War. These authors propose that we should do the same in our approach to the risk of China invading Taiwan. So we should use this tit for tat approach in order to balance it. Have you seen a map? How long it, how long do you believe it would take China to get a significant beachhead in Taiwan if they decide to assault the island? Besides, of course, they don't mention the real risk is that is China excess capacity, the over capacity for exports, which is especially will be especially dangerous if trade policies are applied as promised. They don't consider the effect on China of Putin's victory that may convince Xi Jinping that what Krugman called foreign adventurism is the only solution for a Chinese economy that is still stagnant, and that would become even more stagnant if they are surrendered by tariffs. As I mentioned in my previous video, It's ridiculous to believe that Xi Jinping is going to fall on his knees and cry while the Chinese party is devoured, Chinese Communist Party is devoured by protests. No, he's going to do the last option possible. If China's strength is not just their army, their main strength is their economy, because that would let them sustain a long-term war. And if Putin wins, you can count that it's going to be a war against not China, but going against both of them. And that's going to be very nasty. These two idiots don't seem, of course, don't have any consideration about that. So about these factors. The only consideration is about whether you make a tit and they do make a tat, and we have to keep the balance, because otherwise you could be overstepping on on an actual red line, and then Putin would go mad. Why have I have addressed this idiotic article? For one reason: to expose the great mediocrity of the Biden administration on foreign policy, how Trump is going to make it worse, and how Europe is the only hope to prevent a situation in which we could get closer to the nightmare scenario of a war against both Russia and China. We cannot, just because we choose a corny name, salami strategy, cool. We cannot, just by doing that, give credibility to all the pile of stupidity we have seen in the minutes we have spent in this video. At least that should tell us something. It doesn't work, and it could lead to catastrophic consequences. And having said that, I leave you with our newscast.
Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour. Among other news.
In reaction to the Snow White trailer, Disney has decided to move the premiere to October. The reaction to the dwarves gave us an idea. Let's move it to Halloween, I told myself. Then we can include a scene where Snow White dethrones the evil queen, declared Bob Iger, Disney's CEO. B. Fort Myers man who made false bomb threats against himself in another person's name as revenge. Not knowing that using the same IP address would reveal his identity will become the poster child of a campaign against homeschooling. C. After a closed-doors meeting in Mar-a-Lago, Republican leaders decided, in an unprecedented move, to condition aid to California to 1. Californians accepting Jesus as their personal savior. 2. Replacing their progressive income tax with a tariff. 3. Firing all lesbians in the fire department because their presence is self-explanatory of the fires. 4. Implementing leaf-raking programs in Los Angeles's forests. 5. Making budget cuts in the fire department and the ANF, Angeles National Forest Service. 6. Buying a license to display Trump's name in City Hall. 7. Model their emergency service using the Texas model, which was so successful during the 2021 Texas power crisis. D. Members of the Secret Service declared off the record that former President Biden was successfully intercepted on January 20th. When he was on his way to the U.S. Capitol to give his speech of inauguration for a second term, he adamantly declared to have won after beating Medicare, Putin, Hamas, Pelosi, and all the baddies. Breaking news: President Milei, unable to resist the power of feminist dance, resigns and leaves Argentina on a plane, presumably bound for Washington. Their choreographies, their songs and their fringe haircuts were much more than the libertarian president could resist. The activists who brought down the Argentine president announced that the name of the new president will be announced tonight at a press conference at the Casa Rosada.
This has been the news of this hour. Sponsored by Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit. Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? Did you vote for Trump in 2016 and then in 2020? This is the right church for you. If so, Church of the Holy Redeemer's Power in the Spirit is the only Christian church that can promise you in the Lord to have 72 virgins in heaven for only a donation of $50 a month. You will have access to those 72 virgins in heaven. For an additional $25, you will be allowed to replace 10 of them, and for $100, Heaven Premium, you will be allowed to choose them for yourself. Guaranteed, if you're not satisfied with those 72 virgins after you die, full refund of your money. We accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover.